My son and my late husband's lawyer tore up my deed together. They never expect the trap I set for them. I have always decorated early for Christmas. Max used to joke that I could smell December before the calendar did, and even after he passed, the habit stayed with me. It was my way of keeping the warmth of him close. So that afternoon, with the last string of lights secured along the banister, I stood back and allowed myself a small breath of hope. I told myself that maybe this year Julian would soften, that maybe the season would melt whatever bitterness he carried toward me. I practiced a welcoming smile in the hallway mirror before opening the door to him and Marla. I should not have bothered. Julian stepped inside, looked around once, and laughed exactly the way a cruel child laughs after breaking something delicate. "Looks like a nursing home dumped its trash in here," he said, flicking a finger at the wreath I had just hung. Marla walked in behind him, letting her eyes travel across my living room with that assessing stare she always used when she planned to cause harm. "Max used to say this house held the energy of the dead," she murmured, loud enough for the guests who had arrived early to hear. "Seems he was right. Nothing has changed." I swallowed my breath, kept my shoulders from shaking, and offered chairs. I wanted peace, even if it meant bending until I nearly snapped. Julian sprawled onto the sofa like he owned the place. Marla did not sit. Instead, she pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on my coffee table, sliding it toward me as though she were serving legal papers in a hostile courtroom. "Let us get to the point," she said. "This year, Christmas will be at Julian's house, and before that happens, we need you to transfer this property to its rightful owner." I blinked, unsure I heard her correctly. "This is my home," I said. "Why would I sign anything?" Marla's lips curled upward. She opened the folder, removed a document, and tore it straight down the center before I even registered what she held. "This copy is worthless anyway," she said. "You do not have the mental capacity to manage a property like this. Better to avoid trouble now." My breath tightened as the pieces drifted to the floor. Julian leapt up, pointing at me as if I were an infection. "You do nothing but drag us down. I am done letting you ruin my life. Sign the damn house over or stop pretending you matter." Guests shifted uncomfortably, but none of them intervened. Marla stepped closer to me, tilting her chin upward with casual cruelty. "Max always wanted the house to go to Julian," she announced. "He just never said it because he pitied you." The room fell silent. I felt myself pulled forward, pushed into a corner, treated like an intruder in the place Max and I built together. My legs trembled, but my voice stayed steady. Before I could speak, Marla raised her arms in mock generosity. "Let us all acknowledge the truth. Kathleen is no longer capable of making adult decisions. She is a burden, and this house should serve someone who actually contributes to society." Around this moment, when humiliation settled thick inside the room and my heart pounded so sharply it felt audible, I caught myself thinking of all the people listening to my story now. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I looked back at Marla, still stunned by the bluntness of her attack. "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. Julian scoffed. "Because you are old, you are slow, and you are in the way. We need the house for our future. You barely need it at all." His voice rose. "Sign it. Today." He leaned in so close I felt his breath on my cheek. "No more dragging things out. No more pretending you have a place here." I steadied myself on the corner of the table, suddenly aware that everyone in the room was watching to see if I would fall apart. Marla tapped the remaining papers. "We can file the guardianship request this week," she said pleasantly. "The court always sides with the younger, capable generation. You cannot stop the process, but you can make it easier by signing now." The pressure in my chest grew, but I refused to break before them. "You cannot force me out of my home," I said, though the words came out more fragile than I wanted. Julian laughed again, uglier this time. "We already can," he said, "and we will." He reached for the pen on the table as if he might shove it into my hand by force. Just then, the front door swung open. A sharp gust of cold air rushed in, followed by a familiar voice. "Mom?" Clara stepped inside, breathless from rushing home after my shaken phone call earlier. Her eyes widened with horror and rising fury. "What the hell is going on here?" Marla blinked, startled by Clara's sudden appearance. Julian's face twitched with something between annoyance and panic. Clara stormed toward them, grabbing the torn deed fragments off the ground. "Did you do this?" she demanded. "Are you threatening my mother?" Julian rolled his eyes. "Stay out of it, Clara. This does not concern you." She stepped directly in front of me, shielding me with her body. "It concerns me now," she said, her voice trembling with anger. I placed a hand on her arm. My voice came out quiet but firm. "Let them speak, Clara." I looked straight at Julian and Marla, meeting their arrogance with the growing certainty inside me. "You can tear paper," I said slowly, "but you should remember this." I leaned forward, letting the strength return to my voice. "Soon, I will tear apart every lie the two of you have built for years." Marla stiffened. Julian flinched. And for the first time in a very long time, the fear in the room did not belong to me. People like to say, hatred always begins with a single mistake. But in my life, hatred grew like mold quietly, slowly, until it covered every corner. And somehow, Marla was always standing at the center of it, feeding it, shaping it, smiling through it. The first seed was planted long before Max died, back when Marla was still a hungry young attorney with ambition sharper than a knife. She admired Max too much, too shamelessly, and when he didn't return her attention, she created her own narrative. She told people that I was jealous, that I kept Max from accepting a major development project in Knoxville. He could have been a name this town remembered, she told church families, but Kathleen dragged him down because she couldn't stand his success. I didn't hear the rumor until months later, and by then it had rooted so deeply that I couldn't pull it out. I became the woman who ruined her husband's future, a label I never earned, but one people repeated because gossip tastes sweeter than truth. The second wound came when Julian was young, maybe 4 or 5. He'd spilled soda on my white carpet, and before I even finished grabbing a towel, Marla had already whispered to 2 neighbors that I slapped him across the face. I never touched him. I never raised my hand to any child in my life. But Marla retold the story so many times, with tears, with trembling lips, with that attorney's talent for persuasive detail, that the town chose to believe her. "Poor boy," they said. "Growing up with a mother like that must be terrible." Julian heard the rumor too. Children don't know how to separate truth from repetition. And he grew up believing I had once hit him so hard he fell to the floor. I learned this years later. During one of his angry eruptions, anger he believed was justified. Marla made sure her lie outlived the moment. Then came the night Max died. That grief is still a heavy stone in my chest. It was his heart, a sudden stop, a silence so violent it hollowed the world around me. I called for help as fast as my shaking hands allowed, but it wasn't fast enough. Nothing could have saved him, but Marla didn't care about truth. She cared about power. 2 days after the funeral, she whispered to Julian, "If your mother hadn't waited, your father would still be here." He clung to that sentence like a weapon. Marla repeated it everywhere, at the grocery store, at the diner, even at Max's old job. Soon, people looked at me like I had personally chosen the moment my husband should die. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but grief had swallowed my voice whole. Silence became my only refuge, and silence made me look guilty. But the deepest cut came through Clara. My daughter was bright, hopeful, full of promise. She took a part-time job at Marla's firm during her freshman year of college. Months later, she returned home pale and trembling after Marla accused her of stealing confidential documents. The firm filed a report. Clara lost her scholarship. She packed her things the same night, convinced that I believed Marla instead of her. I begged her to stay, but she left without looking back. Marla watched from the porch across the street, her expression unreadable. To this day, I don't know whether she enjoyed the destruction or simply accepted it as the cost of getting what she wanted. After Clara left, the rumors about me became routine background noise. People crossed the street when I walked by. They whispered in aisles, lifted eyebrows, lowered voices. I was the wife who caged her husband, the mother who struck her child, the widow who let her husband die, the woman whose own daughter fled because she couldn't stand living under my roof. Every cruel story pointed to the same conclusion. I was the problem. I was the poison. I was the villain. And Marla? She kept her hands clean. Always the respected attorney, the articulate advocate, the loyal friend. She shaped herself into the image of virtue while she carved me into the image of sin. Julian believed every lie she fed him. Clara fought alone because she thought I abandoned her, and I caught between a manipulated son and a daughter who ran from a false accusation stood alone for 20 years. By the time this town finished rewriting my life, I barely recognized it myself. But the truth never disappears. It only waits. And like all buried things, it eventually claws its way to the surface. I first noticed something was wrong when Marla stopped pretending to be polite. Normally, she hid her contempt behind legal jargon and thin smiles. But that month, 1 month before Christmas, she became openly tense, restless, sharper than usual. She and Julian began showing up unannounced, walking through my home like inspectors, making notes on their phones, opening closets, pointing at repairs I needed. I thought it was just their usual rudeness, but I was wrong. They weren't checking on me. They were evaluating the property. I didn't learn why until much later, but the signs were everywhere. Marla's firm had been mentioned in a small-town scandal, something about missing tax records and improper filings, and she was suddenly scrambling to correct mistakes she swore she never made. Julian, on the other hand, had just lost nearly everything in a business venture he swore would make him a new man. Instead, it made him desperate. I could see it in his eyes, the hollow look of someone who had run out of money and excuses at the same time. What I didn't know until I overheard it by accident was that they had found a solution. My house. My quiet, decades-old home, the only safe place I still had in this world. They planned to use it as collateral for a massive loan Marla needed to pay what she owed and for Julian to clear his failed debts. But to do that, they needed me out of the way. That was when the papers appeared. Documents left accidentally on my kitchen table. Forms on the hall console. A packet in Julian's bag left half open on my couch. Every sheet painted me as incompetent, forgetful, confused, unable to manage daily tasks. They listed symptoms I didn't have, behaviors I never exhibited, all written in Marla's precise legal handwriting. According to them, I couldn't cook, couldn't remember appointments, couldn't handle money, couldn't be trusted to live alone. I was turning into a ghost of myself on paper long before they intended to make it happen in real life. They even filled out intake forms for a nursing facility 2 towns over Coastal Pines, a place I'd only heard of from women at church who said, "Old folks go in and never come out." They planned to send me there before Christmas so they could move into my home without the inconvenience of my presence. I discovered their intent by accident. I was walking past the laundry room when I heard Julian's voice, sharp and dismissive, slicing through the quiet. "Just get her into the damn place before Christmas. She can't live that much longer anyway. Once she's in, the house will be ours." I froze. The laundry basket slipped in my arms, hitting the floor with a dull thud, but they didn't hear it. They kept talking. Marla lowered her voice, but her tone was venom soft, the kind that rots wood from the inside. Max should have left the house to me the moment he realized he made a mistake. Kathleen was always the obstacle. She's the last thing standing in my way. Once she's declared unfit, everything transfers cleanly. Mistake, obstacle, last thing standing in her way. She spoke about me like I wasn't human, like I was a locked door she was tired of kicking. My breath shook, but I didn't make a sound. I waited until they walked upstairs before I picked up the basket again. My heart felt like a cracked stone, too heavy to carry. Their cruelty was not new, but their audacity was. They didn't just want to hurt me, they wanted to erase me. I sat alone in my bedroom that night, the echo of their voices swirling around me. I felt foolish for ever believing Julian still loved me in some hidden corner of himself. I felt foolish for thinking Marla's resentment was petty jealousy instead of something deeper, darker, more calculated. And then, like a warm hand placed on my shoulder, I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. The safe. The one hidden beneath the workshop floor, built by Max himself, long before Marla ever slithered into our lives. The one he told me about only once, on a rainy night when the power was out. "Only open it," he whispered, "if you ever need to protect yourself from something bigger than you can fight alone." I never understood what he meant. I thought he was being dramatic. But sitting there that night, listening to Marla's and Julian's words replay in my mind, I finally understood. Max had known. He had seen something in Marla long before I did, and he had prepared for it. I stood slowly, feeling something in me steady, not anger, not fear, but a kind of clarity born from survival. The house they wanted so badly, the house they tried to steal by turning me into a helpless caricature, was about to become the weapon that ended their scheme. For the first time in years, I felt the faint spark of power return to my chest. They thought I was vulnerable. They thought I was alone. But they had forgotten one thing. Max never left me defenseless. The early Christmas preview was Marla's idea, not mine. She wanted guests, decorations, and a stage to parade her importance. I only agreed because I didn't want more tension before the holidays. I should have known it wasn't a gathering, it was an ambush. The moment Julian walked through my living room, his eyes swept across the decorations I had spent 3 days arranging. Max used to do this with me, humming carols under his breath. That memory barely had time to warm me before Julian destroyed it. He smirked and said loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear, "Look at this place. Old decorations for an old parasite. You should just sign the house over so we can finally fix this dump." Laughter rippled through a few people, not the kind that's cruel, but the kind that comes from cowardice. They didn't want trouble, so they let the cruelty pass by them like wind. I swallowed hard and answered quietly, "Julian, please, not tonight." He stepped closer. "Then when? Before Christmas? Or before we send you to Coastal Pines with the rest of the forgotten relics?" Before I could respond, Marla's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade dipped in ice. "Max told me once that he wasted the best years of his life protecting you. He said you held him back from everything he could have been." She let the words hang in the air, letting them rot the room from the inside. I didn't look at anyone. Not the guests shifting uncomfortably, not the children staring with wide, confused eyes. I just kept my hands folded, steady, even when my heartbeat wasn't. Then Julian grabbed my arm. Hard. "Come on, old woman," he hissed. "Stop pretending you have a say in this. Sign the damn house." I pulled my arm back, but he tightened his grip. I tried to speak, "Julian, let go," but he shoved me backward just as I opened my mouth. My back crashed into the Christmas tree. A glass ornament slipped off a branch and rolled across the floor, spinning to a stop at my feet. Julian laughed. "Look at that. Just like you. Touch you a little, and you fall apart." The room froze. Even the music stopped when someone fumbled the speaker. I didn't cry. I didn't even gasp. I simply pressed a hand to the floor, feeling the cold wood through my palm, steadying myself. But someone else reacted. "Don't touch her!" The voice came sharp, furious, and unfamiliar, coming from my daughter. Clara, who had only just walked in, dropped her coat and ran straight for Julian. She shoved him back with both hands. It didn't knock him over, but it startled him enough to make him step away. "What the hell is your problem?" Julian barked. "You are," Clara snapped. "You think you can scream at her, shove her, humiliate her? She raised you. She fed you. She gave you a home you never deserved." Marla stood back, arms crossed, watching Julian spiral as if she wanted him to. "Clara, sweetheart, you don't understand the full story." "Don't call me sweetheart," Clara said, her voice shaking with fury. "You've lied to my mother and poisoned this family for 20 years. I'm done pretending you're anything but a parasite feeding on her grief." Marla stiffened. Julian's nostrils flared. "Stay out of it. This is between me and the woman who ruined my life." Clara pointed a trembling finger at him. "She didn't ruin your life. You're doing a fine job of that yourself." The crowd began dispersing quietly. slipping out the door. No one wanted to be part of what this night was becoming. I couldn't blame them. Julian thrust a hand toward me again, frustration boiling over. She's signing that deed. One way or another. Something in me, something that had been quiet for far too long, finally stopped shrinking. I stood up slowly, brushing pine needles off my sweater. I looked Julian in the eye, and then Marla. For the first time, neither of them looked big to me. They looked small, petty, transparent. I said simply, "You two have lied for so long you don't even remember what the truth feels like." Julian scoffed. "Truth? Please, you wouldn't know truth if—" I raised a hand, and he stopped mid-sentence. "You think you know everything," I said quietly, "but you don't know anything." Clara stepped closer to me, placing a steadying hand on my back. The warmth of her touch told me I wasn't alone anymore. I looked around the room at the broken ornament, the crushed pine needles, the fading lights on the tree, and I felt the shift inside me become complete. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't waiting for kindness that would never come. I wasn't hoping for understanding from people who fed on my suffering. That night, when the guests were gone and the house was quiet again, I walked into Max's old workshop with a determination I hadn't felt since the day he died. I knelt on the cold floor, reached beneath the workbench, and pulled the wooden plank aside. The safe was still there, waiting, and for the first time, I understood why Max hid it from the world, because one day he knew I would need it. I had not opened Max's workshop in years. The air felt colder there, untouched, like time had sealed every tool, every piece of sawdust, every memory in place. But I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the corner where the floorboard had always creaked twice when stepped on. I knelt down, lifted the small wooden plank Max once showed me, and there it was, the old steel safe he installed the year before he died. He had told me, "Open it only when you feel the world turning against you." I guess he always knew this day would come. My hands shook not from fear, but from the weight of what I might find. The combination spun beneath my fingers, clicking like distant thunder. When the lock finally opened, the door groaned, as if exhaling 2 decades worth of secrets. Inside were neatly stacked folders, an external hard drive, a sealed envelope with my name, and a USB drive wrapped in one of Max's handkerchiefs. The sight made my breath hitch. Max wasn't a man who planned ahead unless he feared something. I pulled out the first folder, labeled in Max's handwriting. Julian. My stomach twisted. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. It wasn't medical records. It wasn't school reports. It was a birth certificate. Julian's birth certificate. Father, Max Stroud. Mother, Marla Denning. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth, steadying myself. The room seemed to tilt. I reread the names 3 times before the truth sank in. Julian wasn't adopted out of compassion or charity. He was Max's son, his secret child with Marla, the boy I raised as my own, the boy who now shoved me into Christmas trees and called me a parasite, was born from the betrayal Max never confessed. I closed the folder gently, not out of forgiveness, but out of grief for a truth denied to me for so long. The next item in the safe was a flash drive inside a small velvet pouch. A note taped to it said, "Play it only when you're alone." I inserted it into my old laptop, the screen glowing weakly as the drive loaded. A video popped up. Max's face appeared older, tired, eyes rimmed with stress I never understood back then. "Kat," he said, voice cracking on my name. "If you're watching this, it means I didn't fix what I should have fixed years ago." My breath trembled. I pressed a hand over my mouth as he continued. "I failed you. I let Marla into my life long before Julian was born. She threatened to destroy everything, your reputation, my job, even Clara's future, if I didn't help her. She kept me on a leash for years. The money she took, the documents she made me sign, the lies she fed the town, all of it was meant to isolate you so you'd be too alone to fight back." He paused, looking like he fought the urge to cry. "I'm sorry for Julian. I'm sorry he grew up believing lies about you. She made sure he hated you, because she wanted him for herself. She never wanted him to love you." My heart clenched. Max leaned closer to the camera. Kat, listen to me. I left everything you need in that safe. Every falsified document she forced me to sign. Every email where she threatened me. Every receipt from the bribes she accepted. And the original property documents she tried to alter. I know she will come for the house. I know she will use Julian to break you. Please, don't let them take it. Don't let them take the last thing I built for us. He swallowed hard, eyes filling with regret so real, it squeezed my chest. Live for yourself, Kat. Live longer than I did. And when the time comes, fight them the way I never did. The video ended. I sat frozen, staring at the dark screen, unable to move. It felt like Max had reached out from the grave to place a sword in my hands. I wiped my face and opened the next folder. Forged documents. Property transfers with Max's forged signature. Drafts of wills that Marla had edited. Bribe receipts. Manipulated medical records claiming I was mentally unfit to manage a household. All of it meticulously saved by Max. He had been preparing for a war he knew he wouldn't survive. When I opened the envelope with my name, I found one more handwritten letter. Max wrote, I love you, I always have, and I regret every day I let Marla poison our home. Forgive me only if it gives you peace, not because I deserve it. This proof belongs to you now. Protect yourself. Protect Clara. Protect the truth. My vision blurred again, but I forced myself to keep going. I plugged in the external hard drive. Inside was a folder named Marla. Hundreds of emails, hundreds of threats. A 20-year timeline of manipulation, extortion, and corruption. Clara knocked softly on the workshop door. She had followed me after the preview party, refusing to leave me alone. When she saw the open, safe, she froze. Mom, what is all this? I handed her Julian's birth certificate first. Her jaw clenched. Then Max's video. She watched all 7 agonizing minutes in silence. When it ended, she sat heavily beside me. They used you, she whispered. For years. They used all of us. I nodded, unable to speak. Clara wiped her eyes and reached for the hard drive. Let me help. I know how to extract emails and metadata. Whatever Max left here, we're going to use it. And just like that, the daughter I thought I had lost sat beside me, her fingers typing quickly, her expression fierce and protective. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel alone. For the first time, the lies were no longer winning. And for the first time, I knew. The storm was coming, but it wouldn't be crashing down on me. It would be crashing down on them. I invited Julian and Marla back to my house 2 days after opening Max's safe. I kept my voice steady over the phone, polite even, because people like them always mistake calmness for weakness. It's time for a family meeting, I told them. Before Christmas comes, they must have thought I finally broke. They came eagerly. When they walked in, they froze. Clara sat on the couch, arms crossed. Beside her, my new attorney waited with a folder open on his lap. A camera stood on a tripod, already recording. Marla's smile vanished first. Julian's confidence flickered like a candle in a draft. What is this? Marla snapped. Truth, I said. I think it is time all of us hear it. I placed the documents on the table one by one. The real birth certificate, the video Max recorded before he died, the proof of forged property transfers, copies of the emails Marla sent, threatening him and manipulating legal files, and finally, Max's last letter to me. Julian's face drained of color. He stared at the papers as if they had physically struck him. Marla froze completely, not blinking, not breathing. She looked like stone that finally understood it was about to crack. This, I said, tapping the birth certificate, is who you really are, Julian. And this, I placed the USB containing Max's confession beside it, is who your father really was. Julian shook his head slowly. No, this is fake. This is all fake. You think your father forged his own signature on a video? Clara said. Her voice was sharp, cold. Or maybe he faked the emails where your mother blackmailed him? Shut up, Julian muttered. Maybe he faked being dead too? She continued. I said shut up. Julian barked, slamming his fist on the table so hard the camera shook. My attorney remained still, only lifting a brow. Marla finally found her voice. "You are deranged, Kathleen. You always have been." Max was confused. He was grieving. No, I said firmly. He was terrified of you. Marla stiffened. "And now," I continued, "you should be terrified too." For a moment, silence filled the room like a thick, suffocating fog. Julian's nostrils flared. His chest rose and fell fast. I recognized that expression. Max wore it whenever his temper overtook his humanity. Then the switch flipped. "You think this changes anything?" Julian roared, turning on me. "You think you can just humiliate us and walk away? You ruined my life the moment you took me in." Clara stood. "She raised you. She fed you. She put you through school. You owe her everything." "I owe her nothing," Julian shouted, flinging a chair across the room. It slammed into the wall with a sickening thud. "She is nothing to me. She never was." "You are proving everything," Max said. Clara shot back. "Every word." Julian's eyes snapped to me, burning with something feral. "Ba ma ming tem mo chu nua," he growled. "Toi se lam cho ba kam vin vien. Ba hio kong?" My attorney rose slightly from his seat, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand. I wanted Julian to reveal everything, to show exactly who he had become. Marla did nothing to stop him. She stood behind him with that cold, calculating stare, as if she were studying her own creation unravel. Julian paced, knocking things over as he moved. "This is my house." "Mine. You should have died when Dad did. You should have left me alone. You should have." A sharp knock cut through his rant. 3 quick, loud strikes. Clara exhaled in relief. The neighbors must have called. 2 police officers stepped inside after I opened the door. "We received reports of yelling and possible threats," one of them said. He looked directly at Julian. "Sir, we need you to calm down." Julian didn't calm down. He charged toward me. "You think cops will save you?" he screamed. "I'll be komai truck mat ha, ba jiathoitha." One officer immediately stepped between us. "Sir, step back right now." Julian shoved him. "Get out of my way. This is my house. She's dead if she doesn't sign." The officer steadied himself. His partner stepped closer. "Sir, this is a criminal threat. If you continue—" "Continue?" Julian roared. "I will do more than continue. No one stops me. Not you, not her, not anyone." That was it. In a swift movement, the officers pinned his arms, locked cuffs around his wrists, and forced him down to the floor. Julian fought hard, thrashing, kicking, spitting insults. Marla lunged forward. "You can't arrest him. This is a misunderstanding. He's my client." "Ma'am," one officer said, "you are a potential suspect in an ongoing fraud investigation. Step back." Marla froze mid-reach. Julian screamed as they pulled him to his feet. "I'll come back. I'll make her pay. I'll burn this entire place to the ground." One officer tightened his grip. "Keep talking, sir. Every word is another charge." As they dragged him out the front door, his threats echoed down the street. The neighbors watched from porches and windows, but none dared step forward. And I? I stood perfectly still. For the first time in 20 years, I felt something that almost scared me with its clarity. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I wasn't alone. And they were finally running out of places to hide. The morning after Julian was taken away, Clara drove me to my attorney's office. I felt strangely steady, as if the storm inside me had finally stopped demanding answers and started demanding action instead. My attorney slid a stack of papers in front of me. The pen felt warm in my hand. "This will finalize everything," he said. I signed my new will without hesitation. Julian would inherit nothing. No money, no heirlooms, no claim to the house, no right to contact me again. And the house, my last piece of Max, my last battlefield, would be transferred into a fund protecting elderly women from financial and emotional abuse. A purpose far better than anything Julian or Marla ever had in mind. When the final signature dried, I exhaled. It felt like releasing a weight that had sat on my ribs for 20 years. "This is your clean break, Kathleen," my attorney said gently. "It's overdue," I answered. We filed the restraining order next. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Monsters should not be given a second opportunity to bite. By noon, Clara and I headed to the police station to inquire about next steps. The building smelled like disinfectant and winter air. I had barely stepped inside when I heard raised voices. "Marla." She stood at the front desk, waving legal documents in frantic, jerking motions. "You cannot keep me from representing him," she barked at the officer. "I am his attorney. I know the law. He needs counsel, and I am the only one qualified to—" "Ma'am," the officer interrupted firmly, "you cannot represent Julian." Marla froze. "Why? Because she stabbed a finger toward me, is feeding you lies? Because she wants revenge?" The officer did not even glance at me. "You are not allowed to represent him," he repeated slowly, "because you are a suspect." Marla's mouth fell open. What?" Another officer stepped forward, holding a folder. "We've verified several documents Mrs. Stroud turned in. We also received digital evidence from an anonymous source confirming your involvement in property falsification, fraudulent transfers during Mr. Stroud's final years, and financial coercion of a vulnerable adult." Marla shook her head violently. No, that's impossible. Those are fabricated. She fabricated them. She's delusional. She always has been." The officer opened the folder. Inside were the printed emails from Max's backup drive, her signatures, her instructions, her threats. Marla went pale, then gray. She grabbed the counter to keep from falling. "That evidence," the officer continued, "combined with your attempt to manipulate legal guardianship for financial gain, constitutes grounds for arrest." "No," Marla croaked. "You can't arrest me. I haven't. I'm a lawyer." "You were," the officer corrected. "The Bar Association has been notified. You will undergo emergency review." It took less than an hour. A judge reviewed the evidence over video conference. The decision came fast and merciless. Marla Denning permanently disbarred. Effective immediately. The moment the order was read, Marla's knees buckled. Her identity, her pride, her armor crumbled like wet ash. The officer gently but firmly pulled her hands behind her back. "Marla Denning, you are under arrest for forgery, falsifying property documents, conspiracy to exploit an elder, and obstruction of justice." Her voice finally broke. "This was supposed to be my life. My future. Max promised me." But the officers were already reading her rights. As they led her toward the holding area, Julian was brought out from the back hallway in handcuffs, his face twisted with fury. He saw me instantly. "Mom!" he shouted, dragging the officers with him. "You ruined my life! You sick, vindictive old woman! You ruined everything!" I looked at him, really looked at him. A man molded from lies, sharpened by cruelty, and convinced the world owed him more than decency. "You destroyed your life, long before I lifted a finger," I said quietly. He recoiled as if the words had struck him harder than any hand could. Clara moved to my side, sliding her fingers through mine. We turned and walked out together, leaving behind the sound of Julian screaming and Marla begging two people who had once stood above me, now reduced to nothing more than noise behind a closing door. For the first time in decades, I felt the air around me lighten. Justice had finally opened its eyes. When the paperwork was finally complete and the restraining orders approved, I moved into my new apartment for independent seniors. The building was small and quiet, a warm contrast to the house where my life had been squeezed and twisted for decades. I didn't bring much, just my wedding ring, a single framed photo of Max from the early years when things were still honest, and a small wooden box he carved for me on our 10th anniversary. Everything else stayed behind, like old shadows I no longer intended to carry. The first night, I sat on the edge of my modest bed and felt the silence settle around me. But this time, it wasn't the suffocating silence of dread. It was gentle, clean, like opening a window after a long winter. Clara visited every Sunday. Sometimes she brought groceries, sometimes flowers, sometimes nothing at all, just herself, which was what I needed most. The years we lost still hung between us like faded curtains, but every conversation opened them a little more. One evening, she held my hands and said, "I came back late, Mom, but I came back to stay." I answered, "You came when I needed you. That's what matters." Julian began sending letters not long after his sentencing. They came once a week, thick envelopes filled with apologies written in shaky handwriting. Clara always picked up my mail, and she opened each one before I ever saw it. She read them in silence, folded them carefully, and placed them in a shoebox she kept under her bed. I never asked to read them. I simply said, "Forgiving someone doesn't mean inviting them back into the place they broke." Clara nodded every time, as if she understood a different layer of the truth with each letter she hid away. Marla didn't write. But word reached us anyway. She was placed in the County Correctional Facility's general population, where former lawyers are rarely welcomed. One inmate who had once begged Marla for legal help only to be mocked and brushed aside, reportedly leaned toward her during a meal and said, "Where's all that power now? Why isn't the law saving you?" Marla broke down sobbing. The woman who once strutted through courtrooms now shook under fluorescent lights, stripped of titles, control, and the lies she built her life on. For the first time in her existence, she had no one left to manipulate. As for me, I found an unexpected purpose in the community room downstairs. Every Wednesday afternoon, a handful of women gathered for tea. Widows, divorcees, mothers estranged from their children. One day, they asked about my story, and I told it. Not the dramatic version, just the truth, as plainly as I could manage. By the end, 3 women were crying. One was clutching my hand, and another whispered, "I thought it was only happening to me." I became someone they trusted, someone they leaned toward when the room felt too heavy. They called me Grandma Kathy. Even the ones older than me, I didn't mind. For the first time in decades, the title didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a home. Then came the day that sealed everything. During a holiday gathering in the community center, the door opened, and Clara stepped inside holding her daughter's tiny hand. Ellie spotted me instantly. Her small face lit up like the first star at dusk. "Grandma Kathy," she squealed as she ran toward me. "I'm here now." She leaped into my lap with the kind of trust that cannot be faked, her small arms circling my neck, her hair brushing my cheek. Her warmth poured into a place inside me that had been cold for far too long. The room fell silent, but not with tension, only with gentle, understanding warmth. I looked at everyone and said softly, "For years, I believed I had lost my family. But the truth is, I only lost the people who never deserved to be called family in the first place." Ellie nuzzled into my shoulder. Clara smiled at me with the kind of peace she once thought she'd never feel again. "Real family," I continued, "sometimes arrives late. But when it comes, it heals everything." I kissed Ellie's forehead as snow began to fall outside the window. And that was the first Christmas of my life that truly felt like peace. Thank you, truly, for staying with me until the end of this story. I spent a lifetime believing silence was strength and endurance was love, but freedom taught me something different. A woman's voice is not meant to be buried, especially when it carries truth. If my journey made you feel something, hope, anger, justice, or simply the comfort of knowing you're not alone, then I'm grateful you listened. There are so many grandmothers, mothers, and quiet women whose stories are still trapped behind closed doors, waiting for someone to hear them. If you want those voices to keep rising, if you want justice to keep echoing far beyond these walls, then please subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Your presence reminds women like me that we were never forgotten. Stay close. More truths are on the way.